Powered by the Montana Television Network. This is the 5:30 News on Q2, Montana's news leader.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Russ.
And I'm Jeanelle Slade. Vice President Mike Pence focuses on fixing Yellowstone National Park.
After a day talking drugs in Billings, Pence and the Second Lady flew out this morning to talk $12 billion of maintenance needs for our country's national parks and how to pay for that.
The Vice President touching down in Yellowstone to take in some sights and take on the topic of deteriorating infrastructure.
MTN's Chet Lehman was there.
Once Vice President Pence and his entourage arrived at Old Faithful, they were greeted by several officials to get a sense of some of what goes on in Yellowstone. The new Facilities Director, Dwayne Bubeck, Fire Services Director, John Cataldo, and Interpretive Ranger, Rebecca Rowland. Pence then went to meet the crowd.
Hundreds of miles of roads, hundreds of backcountry campsites, bridges, tunnels, other infrastructure that have helped open up Yellowstone to the wider world. And it's amazing to think of the impact that this has had on the region and the enjoyment of the people of the United States of America.
The topic in Yellowstone on this day, infrastructure.
Across the Park Service, more than $12 billion in repairs are needed for roads, bridges, water systems, trails, and more.
And Old Faithful living up to its name, putting on a show as Vice President Pence was speaking. Then it was down to business.
We've actually proposed what will be known as the Public Lands Infrastructure Fund. Under President Trump's leadership, we will dedicate 50% of all of the revenues from leases on public lands to improve and maintain the infrastructure of our national parks.
Speeches timed perfectly with an eruption of Old Faithful, but after all the talking was over, there was some work to do. The infrastructure they were here to talk about includes some of that boardwalk behind us here at Old Faithful. Started to fall apart. So after all the talking was done, the Pences, Secretary Bernhardt, and Superintendent Shawley went to work with the Montana Conservation Corps volunteer crew to help repair some of it.
When asked about budget cuts to Interior, the Vice President said this infrastructure proposal will be a solution.
We believe that the combination of investments that we're making is exactly the right level. But the historic investment that we will be making in maintenance, by literally creating a funding stream for maintenance from our public leases, we believe will more than meet the maintenance obligations of our national parks.
Vice President Pence says the Public Lands Infrastructure Fund has broad support from both sides. Vice President not only got in some work, he spent a few minutes with some others waiting for the next eruption. At Old Faithful in Yellowstone, Chet Lehman, MTN News.
All right, thanks so much, Chet. Now, the Pences flew back to Washington, D.C. earlier this evening.
Montana Governor Steve Bullock won't be on the primetime stage later this month for the first presidential debate.
Well, today the Democratic National Committee announced the 20 candidates who will share the debate stage later this month, and Governor Bullock is among 4 candidates who failed to make the grade. To qualify for the first debate, candidates had to either collect contributions from at least 65,000 unique donors or notch at least 1% support in 3 polls.
Although the Bullock campaign maintains the governor did achieve the required support in 3 separate polls, the DNC denied his petition to be included. That decision not sitting well with the Bullock campaign.
In an interview with Fortune magazine, Bullock said, quote, "Keeping me from the first debate shows we haven't learned our lesson from 2016 and that might squander our chances in 2020.
The governor's campaign continues to tout the fact that Bullock is the only candidate in the field who won in a Trump state and has passed major legislation with a Republican-controlled legislature.
Former Vice President Joe Biden, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, and Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren topped the list of frontrunners who made the cuts.
Now, that first debate will be split over 2 nights on June 26th and 27th and will be broadcast on MSNBC, Telemundo, and NBC stations nationwide.
Well, on the weather scene, Bob McGuire busy tonight. Bob, just with summer, it comes storm and warm all together.
I understand we're probably going to have some thunder showers moving in here very shortly. It's about 10 miles out here, out toward the northwest. Let me show it to you on the Doppler radar. You can see that line of showers and thunderstorms. That's basically the big line we have. We've got some lightning with it, and this thing is moving into south central Montana right now. Let's zoom in a little closer, show you the stuff that's making its way into Yellowstone County right now, and it's about 10 miles away. It has reports of dime-size hail with this particular thunderstorm. Let's kind of take a look at it on the 3D Doppler, and as you can see here, there they are, just like a big old line of showers and thunderstorms. But if you can look beyond those guys, there's not much else coming our way. Once this whole line of showers moves in and moves out in the next hour or so, I think the worst of tonight's thunderstorms are going to be moving out of here. So far, they're not considered severe, but they're pretty close. They got a half-inch size hail with 50-mile-per-hour winds blowing in very shortly in the Billings area. Back to you guys.
All right. Thanks so much, Bob.
Former president of Rocky Mountain Bank pleads not guilty to charges of defrauding the bank.
Now, those charges against 45-year-old Stephen Casher include bank fraud, money laundering, and blackmail. The indictment alleges that in September 2014, Casher approved a bank loan to Larry Price Jr. without disclosing the existence of other outside loans that Casher had arranged and knew about.
Now, Price is the man involved in the fraud-filled Billings mansion in Ironwood, who staged his own abduction, admitted to embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. If convicted of the most serious crime, Casher faces a maximum of 30 years in prison and a $1 million fine.
Well, the City of Billings Parks Department has ideas to develop a park on the Yellowstone River and is now looking for your thoughts on the future of Colson Park. According to Big Sky Economic Development, an outdoor amphitheater is among potential features listed in a survey. Now, the city officially kicked off its master plan project for Colson Park last week. Tonight, design teams will reveal some of those potential plans for the 50-acre park. Now, the city's Parks and Rec Department will hold that public meeting tonight from 6 to 9 p.m. at the Billings Community Center. That's at 360 North 23rd Street in downtown Billings.
This month, Help Flight celebrates its 40th anniversary, 4 decades of taking to the skies to help Montanans in need. Q2's Samantha Sullivan spoke with the current flight team about the importance of the program.
High up in the skies above Yellowstone County, a team of paramedics gets to work.
With an ambulance background, I'm used to smaller spaces. However, this is smaller. We're used to bumpy environments. This is bumpier. In an ambulance, you can stand up and you can move around appropriately. You can't do that in the aircraft, so everything is done sitting.
They're part of the Help Flight Team, an air ambulance service run out of St. Vincent Hospital.
The standard answer that you always hear when you get asked that question is, I'm doing it to help people. And this job affords me a really unique opportunity to be able to do that, where I'm autonomous with my partner to be able to deliver care when people really need it and at very critical times.
Providing life-saving care while in a relatively small helicopter or plane may not be everyone's first choice, but for Whitney Jacobs, there was never another option.
When I was 5, Help Flight came out and did a show and tell at my grade school, and the paramedic put me in. I got picked as the little girl that got to get in the aircraft, and I decided that day I wanted to be a paramedic. So with that experience, I set out all through high school looking to become a paramedic, specifically to fly for St. Vincent's Help Flight.
Growing up in rural Montana herself, Whitney saw the impact Help Flight had on the area's small ranching communities firsthand. For her, it was the best of both worlds.
It could be me, it could be my mother, it could be my father. What might not seem like a huge medical disaster to us, when you're rural, it is. And so it's a pretty neat privilege to get to help or go out and rescue, so to speak, these individuals that may have to wait hours for any sort of medical care.
Now she, along with her colleagues, are part of the program's 40-year history, a legacy of safety and care. In Billings, Samantha Sullivan, MTN News.
A community celebration for Help Flight will be held on Saturday from 8 until 11 a.m. The Help Flight helicopter will be on the field at Dealer Park, and the flight team will have a booth set up and may just inspire the next generation of flight paramedics.
Nice story. Coming up on tonight's 5:30 News, it's time for another show-stopping summer for Montana Theater. We'll show you what it takes to get from opening night to curtain call.
And in sports, your Billings Mustangs announced a managerial change just hours before opening the new season. Scott will tell us about that when we come back.
You're watching MTN News with Jeanelle Slade and Russ Riesinger. Storm Tracker weather with Bob McGuire. And sports with Scott Green. This is the 5:30 News on Q2, Montana's news leader.